So, do you use the air element to avoid your most unpleasant emotions? If so, what would that look like? What does that even mean? If you saw my introductory video about emotional avoidance and the four elements, then you have some clue. In this video, we're going to go more into the air element specifically. And the air element is about thought, to oversimplify. The air element and all of the four elements are a way to conceptualize a whole area of reality. And so I will make videos on the other three elements after this, but now I want to do the air element. And one thing about the air element in terms of emotional avoidance is that you'll find it amongst people with high intelligence, but not necessarily high emotional intelligence. We've all met the people who are geniuses, but on an emotional level, not. I'm sure you know people like that, and at some point we've all been like that. So, some people that are very smart have been able to use thought, philosophy, to avoid emotions. I've lived in a lot of different cultures, and so one of the most interesting things about the different cultures is their forms of emotional denial. Now, for example, just to be really stereotypical, okay? And that's what this is when we're using these archetypes. Okay, we go into the realm of stereotypes a little bit, and reality is more nuanced, so I've said my thing. But, for example, I find the British to really use the air element masterfully to avoid emotions. They do it in a way where it's like they have a prepared statement for the emotion. And I'm not even going to try any British accent, but, it would be like, they'll say something like, well, I rather think that da-da-da, it's like they'll say kind of a platitude, well, I think blah, 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 that this is just how it is, and the, stiff upper lip, and you get through it, and you muddle along, and da-da-da. They don't want to talk about the feelings. They want to just put it to bed with a thought. Now that thought could veer towards the earth element, where it's kind of like, well, this is just the way things are, right? That's more of an earth element thing, but using the air element. So basically, it's intellectualizing your way out of emotions. One interesting thing is that after being a healer in New York City, in Manhattan, for over 20 years, and then moving to LA, you notice a lot more people in New York will use the air element, and a lot of people here will use the earth element. in order to avoid emotions. And the earth element, I mean, denial, like everything's fine. And whereas in New York, people will kind of, it's almost like they'll use therapy to get out of therapy. They'll use thoughts that come from a therapeutic place to neutralize the emotions. So what would it look like if you were trying to avoid fear, for example, with the air element? Well, you let's say I'm afraid of sharks, and I'm going to the beach and I'm going in the water, or maybe I don't want to go in the water because I'm afraid of sharks. So what somebody would do using the air element to avoid their emotion is they would go into, well, what is the probability of being bit by a shark? What is the probability worldwide? What are those statistics if we take the outlier Australia out of the counting? What are the historical statistics on this beach? Now, these are all reasonable things. I'm not saying, ooh, emotional avoidance, you're bad. But I'm saying, and this could be just a good way to kind of overcome reactive emotions. So that's great. But what we want to do in terms of our emotional healing is we want to go to the scared inner child that holds the emotion and heal it from that level, from the source. And we're never going to get there when we're avoiding and talking our way out of emotions, right? The core healing is going to come on an emotional processing level. And then when we've done that work, it's highly appropriate and advisable to use statistics, to use probability and all of that to bolster the shift that we've already made. So just to be clear about that. How would it look to avoid feelings of insecurity and low self-confidence, right? We give ourselves a pep talk. We would say, well, I have this salary and I've achieved this and that in my life, and, what the hell? I don't need to be insecure. So we can try to talk ourselves out of it. We can make a game plan for here's how I'm going to try to come off, here's what I'm going to do. But in the end, again, what we're doing is we're rejecting the inner child who's feeling the insecurity, who's feeling not good enough, and we're trying to make it go away through an intellectual process that can be somewhat effective, but I would argue it's not generally effective in the long term. And so it would be better to use the intellectual process after you've done the emotional healing. And not like all the emotional healing gets done all at once, but, if it's multiple rounds, like first we go and we deal with processing those emotions of the inner child. Then we move on to creating a new story. Creating a new story is really important. So I'm not saying that any reframing of the story is automatically using the air element, using the intellect to avoid emotions. No, it's not. But what I am saying is that the primary thing that we need to do is pull the weed out by the root. And the root generally lies in childhood in a past traumatic event. So when you deal with that, then you have a leg up on dealing with all the rest of it. Okay? So think of how you avoid emotions by going through these mental processes. For example, do you avoid emotion saying, my emotion doesn't make sense? Well, if you do that, you're assuming that emotions have to be based on logic. And that would be a very faulty assumption. I think if you just think about it for a moment, you'd agree. Another false assumption comes through when we say, and I mentioned this in the first video, I believe, I don't know where this emotion comes from. Right? Which is kind of the same thing. But I need to find out where my insecurity comes from. Okay. What if I told you the answer? Then will you never be insecure ever again because you have this magical answer? No. This is part of the process to understand the roots of our issues. But what happens when the mind, the air element, takes over is that we think if we have an intellectual understanding, that will automatically lead to healing, to transformation. And that is not correct. So just when you look at your own patterns of emotional avoidance, your patterns of emotional avoidance are the patterns that keep you stuck in negative emotions. And so when you look at those emotions and you deal with those emotions, and you do that on the emotional level, then you can have some really major transformational episodes that change your life. And you'll get yourself into a place where you don't mind feeling whatever you feel because you realize you already have been feeling it your whole life. And if you just take one more moment to actually go to the root, to the inner child, and do the healing, cry the tears if you need to, shake in fear if you need to, let the inner child express through you, and love the inner child. And there's more to it than that, but that's a big part of it, the way I lead my clients through the process. And then you realize that all this talking yourself out of it, over-intellectualizing, has just led to more pain. And you don't need that. So anyway, stay tuned to the channel. Please subscribe so that and hit the bell icon so that you'll get alerted to new videos, because I'm going to do the next 3 elements soon after this, probably every other day. And so leave any comments you'd like in the comment section if you have any questions about your journey with the air element and how you might be using intellect, especially if you're smart. You might even use it more than average to talk yourself out and try to avoid your emotions by overanalyzing and intellectualizing. Thanks so much for watching. If you'd like a personal appointment with me, you can book that on my website, andysway.com, or email me at andysway@yahoo.com. Thank you very much. Bye.